On the 27th of July, the people who run America's largest power grid did something they had never done before. They called an emergency auction because for the second year in a row, they could not buy enough power to guarantee the lights stay on for 65 million people. There was no heat wave and nothing blew up. One new kind of customer is buying electricity faster than anyone can build it, and billions of dollars of its power bill have already landed on households from Chicago to Washington. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly who pays for all of this and why the fix starts by deciding who gets unplugged first. None of that was supposed to be possible, because for 20 years, the American grid was the most boring machine in the country. Electricity demand in the United States sat essentially flat from the mid-2000s into the early 2020s. The government's own energy statisticians explain it simply. Appliances got more efficient, the economy moved from factories to offices, and between them those two things canceled out almost everything growth was adding. Utilities planned around a number that barely moved. Then this July, PJM ran the auction that buys its power years ahead of time. It bought about 138,000 megawatts, and it came up almost 7,000 megawatts short of what it said it needed, for the second year running. The gap is the part that does not fit. Because PJM still got about 95% of the power it asked for. Come home with 95% of your shopping list and you expect a roughly normal bill. Maybe a little high. Instead, this auction cost $16.4 billion, more than any PJM auction in history. Almost everything on the list at the highest total anyone has ever paid. That arithmetic does not work yet. So reach for the explanation everybody already has. It is data centers. It is a better explanation than you would expect, and the best evidence for it is PJM's own. Start with PJM's own forecast. Between 2024 and 2030, it expects peak demand, the most power everyone wants at once, to grow by 32 gigawatts. All but about 2 of those gigawatts are data centers. That is 94% of the growth coming from one kind of customer. Then PJM's own executives. Stu Bresler, PJM's executive vice president, said this after the results. Quote, "This auction leaves no doubt that data centers' demand for electricity continues to far outstrip new supply." Then the witness with no reason to be polite. Every large American power market has an independent monitor whose job is to police it. PJM's is monitoring analytics, and its president is Joe Bowring. Bowring went through this July's $16.4 billion and put a figure on the data center share. $6.3 billion of it, 38% of the whole auction, traced to one kind of customer by the body whose job is to check. That is the obvious answer, argued by the people with the most reason to know. It is strong. And then 2 studies went looking for that money on household bills across the country and could not find it there. In June, a Rutgers policy lab published the most careful version of this question anyone has run. 22,000 zip code areas, 24 states, 10 years, 2,200 working data centers matched to census bill records. Living near one came out about $2 a month higher. Control for comparable areas, and that falls to 90 cents, no longer distinguishable from zero. At the utility level, where rates are actually set, nothing. The second is stranger because of who paid for it. Charles River Associates ran a national version for the Edison Electric Institute, the trade group for investor-owned utilities. An industry-funded study, and I'll say so plainly, because it matters to how you weigh it. In 68% of states, rates over this period simply tracked inflation. Data centers were generally not the cause. And it names one exception in the country, PJM. So both things are true at once. Nationally, the household effect is not there to find. Inside PJM, the market's own watchdog puts $6.3 billion on it. The studies do not contradict Bowring, they locate him. Which kills the explanation almost everyone is using. If proximity were the mechanism, living next to the building would move your bill. It does not. So whatever is doing this is not standing next to the data center. Where does the price actually get decided? PJM's auction is not buying electricity. That is the piece everyone skips. PJM buys promises. Years in advance, it asks generators to commit to being available on the worst day of a delivery year that has not happened yet. Then it pays them to hold that promise. Everyone who wants to sell one puts in an offer. The offers stack up cheapest to most expensive. PJM works down the stack, buying, until it has bought enough, and then it stops. And the price of the last unit it had to take becomes the price of every unit it bought. Not the average, not what each one asked for. One price, set at the back of the line, paid to everybody standing in it. This is not a loophole and it is not a scandal. It has a name. Economists call it a uniform price auction, the standard design for markets shaped like this one, and the number it produces is called the clearing price. You can go and read about it. Picture a hiring hall. Every builder in town hires its crews there each morning. Cheapest crews go first, and the wage everyone ends up paying is whatever it took to get the last crew anybody needed. That works for years. The hall clears, the wage barely moves, every builder plans around it. Then a new outfit turns up needing 20 more crews than the hall has ever filled in a morning. To get that last crew, the wage has to triple, and every builder in town pays the new wage, including the ones who hired the same 2 crews as last year. PJM is the hall. The crews are power plants promising to show up. The new outfit is the data center, and nobody in that story cheated. So watch the rule print 4 times in a row in public. Then watch one grid in America run the same demand through a different rule and get a different answer. The rule printed 4 times, in order. For the delivery year running through 2024 into 2025, the promise cleared at about $29 per megawatt day. That unit is what it costs to hold 1 megawatt on call for a day. $29 was normal and had been for years. The next auction, held in July 2024, cleared at $270. Same product, same grid, more than 9 times the price in 12 months. The one after that cleared at $329, another 22% up, and it hit its cap on the way. A cap here is simply the highest price the auction is allowed to pay. That one existed at all because Pennsylvania's governor, Josh Shapiro, negotiated it into place. And the most recent one, this July, cleared at $325. Also at its cap. Now the thing that changes what all 4 numbers mean. That last one did not clear at $325 because that was the answer. $325 was not what the market wanted to charge. It was the most federal regulators would let it charge. So take the cap off and run the same auction again. It clears at $554.72 across PJM and $777 in the Chicago zone. That is not a forecast of anybody's bill. It is a measurement. It tells you where the last crew in the hall actually stands once you stop capping the wage. And it means PJM paid the most it is legally permitted to pay and still could not fill the order. On an ordinary day, that is a price story. On the evening the power genuinely is not there, it is a different kind of story. One more number, because it settles what is causing this. In the first 3 months of this year, the wholesale price across PJM, which is what your utility pays before anything reaches your bill, rose 76% against the same quarter a year before. Pull that increase apart, and it is nowhere near evenly spread. Transmission, the wires and poles, rose about 5%. Capacity, the auction, rose 398%. The surge is not in the hardware. It is in the promise. Monitoring analytics put it on the record like this. The price impacts on customers have been very large and are not reversible. $16.4 billion committed at one price. Out of whose account does it come? The auction bills load-serving entities, which is the industry's name for your utility. Utilities recover what they pay through the rates they charge. There is nowhere else for it to go. So borrowing $6.3 billion is not a projection. It is money charged in an auction that already cleared. Scale that up, and the last 4 auctions put $29.4 billion of data center-driven charges inside a $63.6 billion total, which is close to half. The obvious next question is what that does to one household's bill, and the honest answer is a disagreement. The NRDC estimates that PJM capacity costs, added up through 2033, could add around $70 a month to an average household bill inside the PJM region. Semi-analysis, an analyst shop that tracks these facilities one by one, models something smaller and sooner. About 15% on a PJM bill this year, which is roughly $25 to $30 a month. Those two do not reconcile, and splitting the difference would be inventing a third number. So the disagreement is the finding. Nobody can hand you your figure because it reaches you through your state, your utility, and which kind of customer you get counted as. Now the other side of the ledger, into whose account does it go? Every resource that clears gets paid the clearing price, without exception. The gas plant finished last year gets $325 a megawatt day. So does the plant that was already there, changed nothing, and would have taken a fraction of it? That is the same wage going to the crew already standing in the hall. It is not a scam, it is the point of the design. Because your bid does not set your pay, you have no reason to bid anything but your true cost. That is what keeps the auction honest. And the rule that makes generators bid honestly is the rule that hands incumbents a windfall the moment one enormous new buyer walks in. And if the answer is just to build more, the order book says how long that takes. GE Vernova, one of the main gas turbine makers, is sitting on a backlog of 116 gigawatts. It can currently build something like 10 gigawatts a year. Its own order book is longer than a decade. If the rule is doing this rather than the demand, then a grid with the same demand and a different rule should look different. There is one. The comparison comes from semi-analysis, one analyst shop rather than a regulator, so hold it a little more loosely than the rest. What they find is that Texas has absorbed data center growth on a comparable scale without producing PJM's capacity spike. The reason is structural. ERCOT, the Texas grid, has no forward capacity auction at all. It does not simulate a bad day years ahead and buy promises against it. It prices power as it happens. Same customer, same appetite, same decade. One grid runs that demand through an auction that sets one price years in advance and prints a record. The other runs it through a different rulebook and does not. The AI demand is the constant across both, the bill outcome is the variable. Which points at the rule, not at the megawatts. And that point's somewhere uncomfortable. If the rule is the expensive part, the rational move for anyone big enough is to stop using the market that rule governs. They are already doing it, and they are doing it because somebody else ran this experiment first. In the 1940s, the federal government finished a chain of dams on the Columbia River. Suddenly the Pacific Northwest had more cheap electricity than it knew what to do with. About 10 aluminum smelters were built there to drink it. Smelting takes enormous amounts of power, so the industry went where the power was. The surplus lasted about 50 years. When it turned to scarcity, the smelters found they had no claim on any of it. They had never owned that power, they had rented somebody else's surplus. Alcoa idled the last big one, at Ferndale in Washington state, in 2020, and about 700 people lost their jobs. It closed for good in 2023, this March they demolished it. The companies building AI data centers have read that history. It is what the nuclear power contracts and the build-your-own generation deals actually are. The outfit hires its own permanent crew and stops showing up at the hall. Part of the reason is that being a very large customer with no power of your own is about to get expensive. There is a second reason, and it has to do with what happens on the night there genuinely is not enough. Meanwhile, the exit is narrowing from the other side. In the first 3 months of this year, local opposition blocked or delayed at least 75 data center projects worth about $130 billion. That is not a grid operator turning anyone away. That is neighbors, worried about water and noise, and about exactly the bill increases this video is about. Active opposition groups went from 396 to 833 in 1 quarter. So the newcomers are trying to leave, and the institution they are leaving has spent the year rewriting its own rules. Two very different things are being called the fix, and they are not the same kind of object. The first arrived in March. 7 of the biggest AI companies signed a pledge at the White House. They would fund their own power and grid upgrades rather than push the cost onto ordinary customers. Amazon, Google, Meta, Microsoft, OpenAI, Oracle, and xAI. Read the pledge and you find no enforcement mechanism in it, no independent audit either, and no penalty for ignoring it. It is a promise. Promises are not nothing, they are also not rules. The second one is a rule. It is the emergency auction from the first minute of this video. PJM's board wrote, and I'm quoting, "Existing consumers should not bear higher capacity costs caused by new large loads that do not bring, or otherwise contract for, the new supply necessary to serve them." A large load, in that sentence, means a single customer big enough to move the whole system. In practice, a data center, so from this autumn, the big new ones get a window to go and contract their own power directly. Whatever is still missing goes into that emergency auction, which gets its own higher cap, $555 a megawatt day, against the normal market's $325. And that cost is aimed at the customers who caused it instead of spread across everybody. That new cap is $555. The uncapped clearing price this July would have been $554.72. Whether one of those numbers was chosen with the other in mind, I can't tell you, and neither can any document I read. That is a real fix, and here is where it stops. It governs what gets bought next, and only that. The billions that already cleared under the old rule, the one that spread the cost across everybody, are not refunded by any of it. And deciding who gets billed only ever answers one of the two questions. It says nothing at all about the night the power genuinely is not there. Which is the second lever, and it is the one almost nobody sees coming. Deciding who pays changes who the bill goes to. This one changes whether the last unit is needed at all. From the 1st of June, 2027, any new customer over 50 megawatts that has not secured its own supply goes to the front of the line for being switched off. The industry calls that curtailment. When the grid runs short, those customers get cut first, ahead of the emergency measures that would otherwise start reaching everyone else. They are told in advance, and they can be paid for it. Put that back into the hall's terms. The newest and largest customer, the one whose arrival moved the wage for everybody, is the first one sent home on the busiest morning. It is not the households on that grid, it is the buyer who arrived last. And being the one who can be sent home turns out to be worth real money. Across a single month of a 2023 heat wave, the Texas grid paid one Bitcoin miner, Riot Platforms, $31.7 million to power down. Riot did not lose that month. Riot got paid for being the one that could stop. So, who pays and who gets unplugged first? Those turn out to be the same question, asked from the two ends of one rule. Which brings the arithmetic back around. PJM got 95% of the power it asked for. It was short just under 7,000 megawatts out of 145,000. And the price of all 138,000 it did buy went to the cap. That was never a bug, and it was never a measure of how bad the shortage was. A market with one price only ever asks one question, and the question is not how much is missing, it is what the last unit cost. Which gives you something portable. When a price moves and the size of the shortage cannot explain it, go and find the last unit anybody had to buy. Then find out who needed it. It works on housing near a new plant, it works on water rights. Any market where you cannot make more of the thing quickly, and one enormous new buyer walks in. The last buyer in sets the price for everyone already there. If you want the next shift like this one decoded while it is still being argued over, subscribe.